Hi, this is again my millionth time of Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. And I must say I've grown to really love this work. This work was a safety valve that accompanied me during my last trip to Australia, where I could have been sucked into the vortex of family trauma. But I chose not to, and it was much helped by the work that I was studying, plus friends, plus retuning into pleasant childhood memories instead of grotty childhood memories. Waking the Tiger, somatic response to healing trauma. Why waking the tiger? Why are there two tigers? It's not just one tiger, it's two tigers. Or it could have been hundreds of tigers, but it's two tigers. And it all goes back to 1969 when Peter Levine has his first major breakthrough, where he's actually asked by one of his colleagues if he would like to give relaxation exercises to one of his patients who was suffering from acute panic attacks and moments where she couldn't breathe. And Peter Levine agreed, and what actually happens is that he does the breathing exercises with Nancy, and it puts her in a very panicked state where she really can't breathe. And so Levine also goes in a panic state because he thinks, what am I going to do with her? He doesn't say that, but I'm sure he said that in his head. And at that point he gets this vision of a tiger. And so he follows his instinct and he says, look, there is a tiger running after you. He's climbing, quick, climb that tree and escape. And so, to his astonishment, all of a sudden Nancy's legs start to move and she lets out a blood-curdling scream, and then she trembles for an hour. And it's the trembling and the motive for action that start the healing process for her trauma. And Levine was very lucky that he listened to his inner wisdom, because it could have maybe failed. She could have had a heart attack. It didn't happen like that, but it could have turned into a negative sense, but it didn't. And this was what gave him his major breakthrough through. So when you see that Levine has two tigers, it's not just one tiger, it's not the tiger that motivated Nancy to escape from her vicious cycle of repeated trauma year after year after year as a result of a bad experience during her tonsillectomy. It's not just that, it's the tiger is the catalyst for getting her out of the cycle that's been repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. But the tiger, Levine's tiger, is what gives him the breakthrough to understand the trigger that is there inherent in each and every one of us. It takes a decent therapist, an excellent therapist, to understand what the key words are to motivate the trauma patient. But it's this image of the tiger that saved him and saved her. So he has his tiger and she had her tiger. And the tiger energy is extremely important in advancing in life. It's our life force. And the other thing that I notice about this book is that you have two tigers. They're not looking at each other, they're running parallel, one to each other. There's two parallel tigers. And for me that evokes a sort of journey that the therapist and the trauma victim take it together. And no miracle is just a one-way thing. It's not just the person being healed by an outside force. It's a co-creation between what catalyzes the healing and the healing process. Prior to Nancy's recovery in 1969, most trauma therapies address the mind through talk and the molecules of the mind with drugs. There was perpetual play of the trauma schema, which went from immobility to arousal to unsuccessful escape, then declenching, helplessness, shame, anger, and then leading to disempowerment and immobility, to be replayed as a cyclic pattern for years and years and years. And Nancy's recovery was the first of many success stories that permitted Levine to establish the true cause of post-traumatic stress disorder, allowing us to access the problem at its physiological roots through the felt sense, which allows us to be in the present moment, attuned to our surroundings and bodily sensations. Like the impala or lizard, we also respond to new sounds, smells, and movements. Levine's observation of animal behavior permitted him to establish the following progression, illustrating why prey animals do not remain traumatized after a threat. Immobility, leading to arousal, leading to running, leading to successful escape, leading to empowerment. And also between the escape and the empowerment is the shivering sequence, which seems to be essential. Applied to trauma therapy, Levine tells us that once the arousal state is in evidence, it can be renegotiated. He doesn't claim to present a formula to heal trauma, but he knows and explains the critical processes, providing us with a sort of map for therapy. Applicable in situations of acute trauma, for example with hostages, bombing victims and survivors of terrorism, as well as those who've experienced physical violence, perpetual sexual abuse, sexual sex trafficking, sexual assault, which leads them to disconnect from their bodies and be exploited in other ways, such as in the MK Ultra programs. That's another story. However, as illustrated in Nancy's and Sammy's cases, traumatic reaction can result from seemingly benign situations, like a tonsillectomy, like a visit to a hospital to heal a slightly wounded chin. Restoring an awareness of the neutral and benevolent background ongoing in a person's life. Tracking sensations in the body which come from a neutral spot, simple sensation in the fingertips, the toes, and where elbow moving in space, the taste of water, the movement of the lungs, the sound of your breath, all create an envelope of safety. My rediscovery of the neutral, benevolent background surrounding me in Australia, particularly the bird calls. I was really fascinated by the bird calls and the sounds in the trees, which evoked so many pleasant memories and which helped enormously during my 6 weeks in Australia. Body sensation, rather than a tense emotion, is the key to healing trauma. The felt sense unifies a great deal of scattered data and gives it meaning, It is the experience of being in a living body that understands the nuances of its environment by way of its response to that environment, altering its character in resonance with its surroundings. It supports us in orchestrating the marvel of transformation. Every case history in Levine's work is used to illustrate these arguments. Thanks to Waking the Tiger, I tapped into my own tiger energy. Can't say that I'm totally healed, but I detached from my own trauma, and in the process, I understood not only the trauma of my sister, but those of my mother and father, and in fact a large part of both sides of the family. And I realized that my sister was probably not the only feminine member on my father's side of the family that had suffered abuse. I recognized the traumas of my ex-husband and both sides of his family, many of whom did not survive the Holocaust. The few that did never, ever, ever spoke about it. In studying the case histories of Nancy and Samir, I received a clearer insight into the trauma of my 18-month-old grandson, who at 6 days old underwent 6 hours of open heart surgery and who awakens screaming nearly every night. Of all the case histories in Waking the Tiger, the one that stands out is that of Gladys, I guess because it resonates with the trauma, denial, and cover-up in my own family. I admire Levine's use of Gladys's story, even though she did not return. Trauma is an inherent part of the primitive biology that brought us here. The only way to free ourselves individually and collectively from our traumatic legacies is by transforming them through renegotiation, in other words, by changing our mindset. In these turbulent times, our trauma will only be healed through harnessing our tiger essence, waking up that inner strength that wants to burst out to save us from ourselves. It's by tapping into that magic which only comes to the fore in times of crisis that we will become empowered, like Bob Barkley. Understanding and working through our own trauma is essential if we are to contribute to healing global trauma. Peter Levine's masterpiece, Waking the Tiger, provides hope and guidance for those seeking healing, encouraging individuals to reconnect with their bodies and access their primal resources. In connecting to Source, they will become empowered, discovering their own tiger energy, authorizing them to reclaim their right to joy and well-being. Thank you.